The scream echoed through the metal corridors of the base, a sound so high-pitched and inhuman that for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. But the look of sheer terror in Sarah's eyes confirmed it. It was real. And with that realization, all the horror of the last few days came crashing down on me like an avalanche. My name is Dr. Marcus Blackwell, and until a week ago, I was just another marine biologist on a routine expedition in Antarctica. Now, as I run through the icy corridors of the Aurora Polar Station, fleeing from something that shouldn't exist, I realize that my life, and possibly that of all humanity, has changed forever. It all started with an anomaly, a simple deviation in the sonar readings during a research dive under the ice shelf. My team and I were mapping the ocean currents when we detected a strange structure, buried hundreds of meters below the frozen surface. "It must be a reading error," said Johnson, our sonar technician, frowning at the screen. But the closer we got, the clearer the image became. It wasn't a mistake, it was a ship. The discovery shook our small scientific community. Within hours, the news leaked out and the base was flooded with military teams and government agents. What was supposed to be a peaceful research mission turned into a covert operation overnight. I was assigned to lead the initial exploration team, along with Sarah Chen, our xenobiology expert, and Lieutenant Michael Ross, a tough military man sent to supervise the operation. We descended through a shaft drilled into the ice, our hearts hammering as darkness engulfed us. The ship was old, incredibly old. Its surface was covered in symbols and patterns that defied any human logic, but what we found inside, God, I wish I could erase that image from my mind. It was a stasis chamber, and inside it, floating in a viscous, greenish liquid, was him, the creature, the visitor, as we came to call him in the official reports. Humanoid, but so different from us that the mere sight of it caused a feeling of deep unease. Grey-blue skin, limbs that were too long, large black eyes that seemed to absorb the light, and it was alive, in suspended animation, but unmistakably alive. The following weeks were a whirlwind of frantic activity. Teams of scientists from all over the world arrived at the base, working day and night to try to understand what we had found. I spent endless hours in the makeshift laboratory, analyzing samples and trying to decipher the visitor's alien biology. It was Sarah who first noticed the subtle changes, the temperature of the stasis chamber fluctuating, micro-movements in the creature's eyes. "He's waking up," she whispered, a mixture of fascination and fear in her voice. "We should have stopped there. We should have sealed that damn ship and buried it back in the ice." But scientific curiosity and pressure from the military spoke louder. We decided to try a controlled reanimation process. The day we opened the stasis chamber will remain etched in my memory forever. The acrid smell of the suspension fluid, the heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. And then those black eyes opening, staring at us with an ancient and alien intelligence. For a moment, there was only astonishment. We were facing the first real contact with an extraterrestrial life form. Years of speculation and theory had finally come to fruition. Then, everything fell apart. The visitor moved with impossible speed. Before we could react, he was out of the chamber. The screams started almost immediately. I saw Lieutenant Ross thrown against the wall like a rag doll, his body making a deafening thud as it hit the metal. Chaos, panic. I ran, pulling Sarah with me, as alarms sounded throughout the base. Behind us, we heard the sounds of fighting, gunfire, and that scream, that horrible, inhuman scream that still echoes in my nightmares. Now, as I run through the corridors of Aurora Station, I know that we made a terrible mistake. We released something we don't understand, something dangerous and potentially lethal. The base is in lockdown, communications cut off. We're isolated in the middle of nowhere, trapped with a hostile alien entity. And what's worse, I have the terrible feeling that this is only the beginning, that the real horror is yet to come. As I hide in a supply closet, trying to catch my breath and think of a plan, a question hammers at the back of my mind. What exactly have we freed from the ice? And will we survive to tell this story? The sound of footsteps comes closer. Slow, calculated, non-human. I hold my breath, my heart threatening to leap out of my mouth. Please don't let him find me. Please. The doorknob turns slowly. The cold metal of the supply closet pressed against my back as I struggled to control my breathing. The sound of footsteps came closer, stopping right in front of the door. My heart was pounding so hard that I feared the creature might hear it. The doorknob turned slowly. Inch by agonizing inch, I closed my eyes, preparing for the worst. But then, as if answering a silent prayer, a distant crash echoed through the base. The footsteps quickly moved away, leaving me alone again. I allowed myself a few moments to catch my breath before stepping cautiously out of the closet. The corridor was empty, but dark stains on the floor, blood, I realized with a shudder, told a sinister story. I needed to find Sarah and the other survivors. We needed a plan. Moving silently through the corridors, I began to realize how quickly our situation had deteriorated. Lights flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows on the walls. The ventilation system emitted unsettling noises, as if the base itself was groaning in pain. I reached the main laboratory, where we had carried out the first tests on the visitor. The door was ajar, and I could hear voices whispering inside. I approached cautiously. "We can't just kill him." It was Sarah's voice. "Think of what we could learn." Learn? The deep voice of Dr. Yuki Tanaka, our quantum physicist, was laden with incredulity. "That thing has already killed half the team. Our priority now is to survive and prevent it from escaping from here." I entered the lab, making them both jump with fright. Sarah rushed to hug me, relief evident in her eyes. "Marcus, thank God you're alive." I looked around. As well as Sarah and Yuki, there were 3 other survivors in the lab. Elena Petrova, our Russian climatologist, Carlos Mendoza, a systems engineer, and to my surprise, Lieutenant Ross, although he looked seriously injured. "What happened?" I asked, still trying to process the scene. Yuki answered, her voice tense. "After the creature escaped, it started hunting. We don't know exactly how, Almo, but it seems to be able to take on the form of its victims." A shiver ran down my spine. "Like a chameleon." "More like assimilation," Sarah explained, her face pale. "It absorbs the genetic material and can perfectly replicate the appearance and even the memories of the victim." The implication of this was terrifying. I looked at every face in the room, a dark doubt settling in my mind. How could we be sure who was really human? "We've managed to isolate part of the base," Carlos said, pointing to a digital map on the wall. "But the systems are unstable. We don't know how long the containment doors will hold." Elena, who had been silent until then, spoke in a shaky voice. "What about communications? Can we contact the outside world?" Ross, groaning in pain, sat up with difficulty. "Negative. The storm outside is getting worse. Even if we could send a signal, it would take days for any help to arrive." The reality of our situation began to weigh on us. We were alone, trapped with a hostile alien entity capable of camouflaging itself as one of us. "We need a plan," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "First, we have to ensure our immediate safety. Then, find a way to contain or eliminate the threat." Sarah gave me a disapproving look at the mention of eliminating the visitor, but said nothing. I knew she still saw the creature primarily as an object of study, an unprecedented scientific opportunity. But after what I had witnessed, I knew we were dealing with something far more dangerous than any of us could have imagined. We spent the next few hours fortifying the laboratory, turning it into a kind of base of operations. Carlos worked on the security systems, trying to restore control over the station's cameras and doors. Elena and Yuki inventoried our supplies, while Sarah tended to Ross's injuries. I couldn't stop thinking about the visitor. What did he want? Why had he attacked so violently after being awakened? There was something deeply wrong with the whole situation, something beyond the obvious alien threat. As I helped stack heavy equipment against the door, a disturbing thought occurred to me. What if the visitor wasn't the only one of his kind? What if there were more of them, still sleeping under the Antarctic ice? I shared my concerns with the group. The silence that followed was deafening. If that's true, Yuki finally spoke up, then we're not just fighting for our lives, we're fighting for the future of humanity. The words hung in the air, heavy as lead. I looked at the tense faces around me, each one processing the magnitude of what we were facing. That's when we heard it. A metallic sound, like claws scratching the walls of the corridor outside. Slow, deliberate, approaching. We froze, hardly daring to breathe. The sound stopped right in front of our door. For an eternal moment, nothing happened. Then a familiar voice, horribly, impossibly familiar, came from the other side. "Please let me in. I'm hurt." "I need help." It was my voice. Panic exploded in the room. Ross drew his gun, pointing it shakily at the door. Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Don't open it," I shouted, my mind spinning. "It's not me, it's the creature." The thing on the other side of the door laughed, a laugh that was a perfect imitation of mine. "Oh, Marcus, you don't understand, do you? I'm you now. We are one." I felt my blood run cold. The creature had not only copied my appearance and voice, but also my memories, my personality. How could we fight something like that? The sound of metal being forced filled the air. The door began to give way. "Get ready!" Ross shouted, his voice mixing pain and determination. As the door slowly opened, revealing a distorted version of myself, a terrible certainty solidified in my mind. Our fight for survival had only just begun. And the enemy we faced was more dangerous and ruthless than anything humanity had ever encountered. The laboratory, our last fortress, was about to be invaded. And with it, perhaps, the last bastion of humanity in Antarctica. Chaos erupted in the lab when the door finally gave way. The creature, this twisted, perverse version of myself, advanced with supernatural speed. Ross opened fire, the deafening explosions of gunfire echoing off the metal walls. To our horror, the bullets seemed to have little effect. They pierced the creature's form, but the flesh regenerated almost instantly, like liquid mercury regrouping. "Run!" I shouted, pulling Sarah towards the emergency exit at the back of the lab. Yuki and Elena were already there, struggling to open the heavy security door. Carlos stayed behind, trying to buy time. He threw a tank of liquid nitrogen at the creature, which roared. A sound that was a grotesque mixture of my voice and something completely alien. The last thing I saw before we went through the emergency door was Carlos being grabbed by tentacles that sprouted from the creature's body. His scream of agony will remain etched in my memory forever. We ran through the dark corridors of the base, the sound of pursuit never far away. Adrenaline coursed through our veins, propelling us forward even as our lungs burned with the freezing air. "Where are we going?" Elena gasped, her Russian accent more pronounced under stress. "Communications room," Ross replied, limping but determined. "It's our only chance to call for help." We turned a corner and were faced with a nightmarish scene. The mutilated bodies of our colleagues were strewn across the corridor, some partially absorbed into the metal walls, as if the base itself was fusing with organic matter. Sarah choked back a sob. "My God, what's happening here?" There was no time for mourning or contemplation. The sound of footsteps, now multiplied, as if they were several pursuers, was fast approaching. We reached the communications room, locking the door behind us. Ross immediately threw himself on the console, his fingers flying over the controls. "Damn it," he cursed. "The main system is down. I'll try the emergency backup." While Ross worked, I turned to Sarah and Yuki. "We need to understand what we're up against. Sarah, you've studied the biology of this thing. Any idea how we can stop it?" Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with tears of frustration. "It's like nothing we've ever seen before, Marcus. Its ability to assimilate and regenerate, it's almost perfect, but there must be a weakness, something we haven't considered." Yuki, ever the scientist, was already analyzing the data on a nearby terminal. "The temperature," he muttered. "When we thawed the creature, there was a significant change in its molecular structure. Maybe..." A bang on the door interrupted his thoughts. The creature, or creatures, had reached us. "I did it!" Ross shouted triumphantly. A green light flashed on the console. "Mayday, Mayday! This is Aurora Polar Station. We are under attack. I repeat, we are under attack. We need immediate evacuation." For a moment, there was only static. Then a choppy voice replied, "Aurora, this is the command center. Your message is broken. Repeat the situation." The relief of hearing another human voice was almost overwhelming, but our hope was short-lived. With a deafening bang, the door to the communications room was ripped off its hinges. In the gap stood not one, but 3 distorted versions of our dead colleagues, including Carlos. "No!" I shouted, horrified to see my friend's face transformed into a mask of alien fury. Ross tried to fire again, but his gun failed. In the blink of an eye, the creatures were upon us. Everything turned to chaos and pain. I felt something sharp pierce my arm, an agony like nothing I've ever experienced before. I heard the screams of my companions mixed with the grotesque sounds of the creatures. In the midst of the maelstrom, I saw Sarah being dragged away. I tried to reach her, but my movements were slow, as if I were moving through molasses. "Marcus!" she shouted, holding out her hand to me. Our fingers touched for a brief moment before she disappeared into the darkness of the corridor. I don't know how much time passed. When I regained consciousness, I was alone in the destroyed communications room. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the static of the radio. I staggered to my feet, my arm throbbing where I had been wounded. To my horror, I saw that the wound was closing on its own, the skin moving in an unnatural way. "No," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. "No, please don't." I ran to a broken mirror on the wall. My reflection stared back at me, but there was something wrong. My eyes looked darker, my skin a strange pallor. The terrible truth came crashing down on me. I had been infected. The creature, the visitor, was now inside me, slowly transforming me. Tears streamed down my face as the magnitude of our situation finally hit me. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for humanity itself. With trembling hands, I reached for the radio microphone. "Command center," my voice faltered. "The situation is critical. Do not send rescue. I repeat, do not send rescue. Aurora Station must be placed in total quarantine." I dropped the microphone, exhausted. I knew I had little time before the transformation would consume me completely. I had to find Sarah and the others, if they were still alive. I had to find a way to stop this infection before it spread beyond Antarctica. And above all, I had to fight the darkness I felt growing inside me. Because if I failed, it wouldn't just be the end of Aurora Station, it would be the end of everything. The biting Antarctic cold seemed to penetrate to my bones as I staggered through the corridors of Aurora Station. My mind oscillated between moments of agonizing clarity and hazy periods where alien thoughts invaded my consciousness. The infection was progressing, and I could feel my sense of self fragmenting by the minute. "Sarah," I muttered, my voice hoarse and unrecognizable even to myself. I had to find her. I had to make sure she was still alive. But a part of me, the part that was still Marcus Blackwell, feared what I might do if I found her. I arrived at the biological containment laboratory, hoping to find clues as to Sarah's whereabouts or those of the other survivors. What I saw made me stop in shock. The walls and ceiling were covered in a pulsating organic substance, like giant veins and arteries. In the center of the room, suspended in translucent cocoons, were Elena and Yuki. I approached cautiously, my heart racing. They seemed to be in suspended animation, their expressions frozen in masks of terror. The alien substance pulsed around them, as if it were digesting them. "My God," I whispered, nausea rising in my throat. "What's going on here?" As if in answer to my question, a familiar voice echoed behind me. "Evolution, Marcus, pure and simple evolution." I turned around abruptly. Sarah was standing at the entrance to the laboratory, but there was something deeply wrong with her posture. Her eyes, She wasn't Sarah anymore, at least not completely. "What have you done to her?" I snarled, feeling an alien rage growing inside me. The thing that was no longer Sarah smiled, a cold smile devoid of humanity. "I haven't done anything that isn't already happening to you, Marcus. We're becoming something more, something better." She moved around the room with unearthly grace, her fingers caressing the cocoons that contained our former colleagues. "You see, humanity is fragile, limited, but we can be eternal. We can evolve beyond the constraints of flesh and time." I stepped back, fighting the urge to join her, to surrender to the infection coursing through my veins. "That's not evolution," I argued, my voice shaking. "It's extinction. You're destroying everything that makes us human." "Humanity." She spat the word as if it were poison. "Such a limited concept. We are the future, Marcus. A future without borders, without limits." As she spoke, I noticed something moving in the shadows behind her. With horror, I realized that they were tentacles sprouting from her back and merging with the organic mass that covered the walls. My mind spun, torn between terror at what I was witnessing and a terrible fascination. Part of me, the part that was being consumed by the alien infection, wanted to join it, to merge with this new life form. But another part, the core of what made me Marcus Blackwell, screamed in protest. Memories of my life, of my humanity, flooded my mind. My mother's laughter, the smell of coffee on a Sunday morning, Sarah's gentle touch, the real Sarah, on my face. "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "This isn't the future. It's an abomination." The eyes of the creature that was Sarah narrowed. "You can't fight it, Marcus. It's inevitable." It advanced towards me, its tentacles reaching out to grab me. Instinctively, I retreated to a nearby workstation. My hand found something cold and metallic, a fire extinguisher. Without thinking, I raised the extinguisher and activated it, launching a jet of freezing foam straight into the creature's face. It screamed, a sound that was a horrible mixture of Sarah's voice and something completely alien. I took advantage of the distraction to run, my heart hammering in my chest. As I fled through the corridors, I heard the sound of pursuit behind me, along with the creature's furious screams. I reached a junction and hesitated, not knowing where to go. It was then that I heard a faint voice coming from a side corridor. "Marcus, over here." It was Ross. He was slumped against a wall, bleeding profusely from a wound in his abdomen. I ran over to him, helping him to his feet. "We've got to get out of here," he gasped. "The base, it's not safe anymore." I nodded, supporting his weight as we moved as quickly as possible towards the vehicle hangar. It was our only chance of escape. As we ran, Ross told me about an emergency bunker miles from the main base. If we could get there, we might have a chance of surviving and finding a way to stop the infection. We arrived at the hangar, the sound of pursuit getting closer and closer. With trembling hands, I managed to start one of the snowmobiles. As we were about to leave, I saw the creature that was Sarah enter the hangar, its eyes blazing with an inhuman fury. "You can't run away from us, Marcus," she shouted. "We are the future, and the future always arrives." I pressed down on the accelerator, and the vehicle shot off into the Antarctic night. As we drove away from the base, I saw in the rearview mirror the lights of Aurora Station flicker on and off, as if the structure itself was dying. Darkness engulfed us, the wind howling around us. I didn't know if we would reach the bunker, or if there was any hope of stopping what had been unleashed. All I knew was that, as long as there was a shred of humanity left in me, I would keep fighting. For the good of the Earth, for the good of humanity, and for the memory of those we have lost. The Antarctic night stretched ahead of us, vast and relentless, and somewhere in that darkness lay our last hope of salvation. The howl of the wind and the roar of the snowmobile's engine filled my ears as I drove across the white expanse of Antarctica. Ross lay semi-conscious beside me, his breathing weak and irregular. The storm around us was intensifying by the minute, reducing visibility to almost zero. I fought against exhaustion and the throbbing pain of the infection spreading through my body. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop, to surrender to the transformation I knew was happening inside me. But I couldn't. Not yet. How long? Ross murmured, his voice barely audible over the noise of the storm. I don't know, I answered honestly. The vehicle's GPS had stopped working hours ago, probably affected by the same anomaly that had knocked out our communications. We were navigating almost entirely by instinct. Suddenly, a dark shape emerged from the whiteness of the snow in front of us. I braked sharply, causing the vehicle to skid. "What's that?" Ross asked, forcing himself to sit up. I narrowed my eyes, trying to see through the curtain of snow. Slowly, the shape took on more defined contours. It was a structure, no, a ship, identical to the one we had found under the ice. "Impossible," I whispered. I got out of the vehicle, ignoring Ross's protests. The biting wind whipped my face as I approached the alien ship. It was smaller than the first one, but unmistakably of the same origin. I touched the surface of the ship, feeling a strange vibration under my fingers. At the same moment, a wave of images and sensations invaded my mind. I saw distant worlds, civilizations beyond human comprehension, and a war, an ancient, devastating war that had spread to the stars. I staggered backwards, panting. The infection in my body seemed to respond to the ship's presence, accelerating its progress. I could feel my consciousness fragmenting, alien memories mixing with my own. "Marcus!" Ross shouted, his voice laden with pain and fear. "We have to go." I forced myself back into the vehicle, my mind spinning with the revelations. As I sped through the icy landscape again, I tried to organize my thoughts. "It wasn't an exploration mission," I muttered, more to myself than to Ross. "It was an escape, a quarantine." Ross looked at me in confusion, but I barely noticed him, lost in memories that weren't mine. The visitors' kind. They were at war, against something even worse. They used the infection as a weapon, but lost control. They fled to distant worlds, hoping to contain the spread. Understanding began to dawn in Ross's eyes. And Earth. It was one of the quarantined worlds, I concluded, the terrible truth solidifying in my mind. We weren't the first to encounter these ships. Others have been awakened throughout history. Legends of monsters, shapeshifters, all based on real encounters. A groan of pain escaped my lips as another wave of alien memories flooded my mind. I saw entire civilizations falling, planets being consumed by a pulsating organic mass. "But why now?" Ross asked, his voice weak. "Why here?" Before I could answer, something hit our vehicle with brutal force. We were thrown out, rolling on the hard, icy snow. Stunned, I stood up to see what had attacked us. My heart almost stopped. It was Sarah, or what was left of her. Her body had been transformed into something monstrous, an amalgam of human flesh and alien matter. Tentacles extended from her torso, whipping the air furiously. "You don't understand, Marcus." His voice was a cacophony of sounds, human and inhuman. "This isn't about destruction. It's about unity, about becoming something greater." I stepped back, pulling Ross with me. We were unarmed, exhausted, and wounded. We didn't stand a chance in a direct fight. "Sarah," I begged, trying to reach whatever remnants of humanity might be left in her. "This isn't you. Fight it." For a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of recognition in her eyes, but it was soon replaced by an alien fury. She lunged forward, her tentacles reaching out to grab us. At the last second, I threw myself to the side, pushing Ross away. One of the tentacles caught me, lifting me into the air. The pain was unbearable, as if every cell in my body was being rewritten. "Join us, Marcus," Sarah's voice whispered in my mind. "Be part of something bigger." I fought against the seduction of her words, against the overwhelming desire to surrender. Images of my entire life flashed before my eyes, my childhood, my studies, the moments of joy and sadness that defined me as a human being. With a cry of sheer determination, I managed to break free. I fell into the snow, panting and shivering. Sarah, no, the creature, was preparing for another attack when a deafening roar cut through the air. We looked up to see a helicopter emerging from the storm, its searchlights sweeping the area. The creature hesitated, confused by the sudden intervention. I took advantage of the distraction to run over to Ross, helping him to his feet. "Go!" I shouted over the noise of the propellers. "I'll hold her," Ross protested, but I pushed him towards the helicopter that was now landing a few meters away. I turned to face the creature that had once been Sarah. It watched me, its monstrous form contrasting grotesquely with the purity of the snow around us. "This ends here," I declared, feeling a renewed strength flow through me. It wasn't the alien infection, I realized, but something deeper, more human. It was hope. The creature roared and advanced. I braced myself for the impact, knowing that this could be my last battle. But I was determined to fight, not just for my own survival, but for humanity as a whole. The sound of the helicopter taking off behind me was the last thing I heard before darkness engulfed me. The darkness that would have enveloped me slowly dissipated, giving way to a hazy awareness. I blinked several times, my eyes adjusting to the fluorescent light above. The aseptic smell and rhythmic beeping of machines informed me that I was in some kind of medical facility. "Welcome back, Dr. Blackwell," a female voice spoke softly. I turned my head with difficulty, meeting the compassionate gaze of a middle-aged woman in a white lab coat. Her name tag identified her as Dr. Evelyn Chen. "Where?" My voice came out hoarse, my throat dry as paper. "You're in the WHO quarantine facility in Geneva," she replied, offering me a glass of water. "You've been in an induced coma for almost 3 weeks." I drank the water greedily, fragmented memories flooding my mind. Aurora Station, the visitor, Sarah. "The others," I managed to say. "What happened to—" Dr. Chen's expression turned grim. "Lieutenant Ross survived. He's recovering in another ward. As for the others—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Aurora Station was completely destroyed. A thermonuclear warhead was remotely detonated as soon as the rescue helicopter left the exclusion area. The shock of the news hit me like a punch in the gut. The whole station, everyone left behind. Sarah." Tears burned in my eyes. "What about the infection?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Contained for now," Dr. Chen replied. "You and Lieutenant Ross have undergone intensive experimental treatment. The infection in your bodies has been neutralized, but—" She hesitated. But it left marks, Dr. Blackwell. Changes at a cellular level that we're still trying to understand. You two are effectively the only people on the planet with antibodies against this alien entity." I closed my eyes, letting the magnitude of the situation hit me. We survived, but at what cost? And what did it mean for our future? In the days that followed, I was subjected to an endless series of tests and debriefings. I told and retold my story to scientists, military and government officials from various countries. Every word was analyzed, every detail scrutinized. It was during one of these sessions that I met Ross again. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes still burned with the same determination I saw that fateful night in Antarctica. "They want to know if there are more," Ross told me in a moment of privacy. "More ships, more visitors." I nodded slowly. "And what did you tell them?" "The truth," he replied, his gaze meeting mine. "That we don't know, that we'll probably never know for sure." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with the weight of everything we had lived through and lost. "What happens now, Marcus?" Ross asked, his voice low. I looked out of the bedroom window, observing the world outside. A world that had no idea how close it had come to annihilation, a world that continued to spin, oblivious to the sacrifice of those left behind on Aurora Station. "Now," I replied slowly. "We prepare. We use what we've learned, what we've become, to protect humanity. Because if there are more out there, they'll come," Ross added, a perceptible chill in his voice. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. We were no longer just scientists or soldiers. We were sentinels, guardians of a secret that could change the course of human history. In the weeks that followed, Ross and I were gradually reintegrated into society. Officially, the tragedy at Aurora Station was attributed to a hazardous materials accident. The world moved on, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows, but we knew the truth, and we were determined to be prepared. We founded a secret organization supported by governments and intelligence agencies around the world. Our mission? To monitor, research, and, if necessary, combat any alien threat that might arise. I spent my days immersed in research, analyzing every anomaly, every unexplained report that came into our hands. At night, I was haunted by nightmares, visions of distant worlds consumed by infection, of Sarah and our lost colleagues screaming into the void. But amidst the darkness, there was hope. Each discovery, each advance in our understanding of alien biology brought us closer to a real defense against the threat. One day, as I watched the sunset from my office in the new research facility, I reflected on everything that had happened, about the lives lost, the sacrifices made, and the uncertain future that awaited us. I picked up a photo from my desk, the last photo of the Aurora Station team, taken days before our fateful discovery. Smiling faces, full of hope and scientific curiosity. Sarah, her arm around my shoulders, her eyes shining with the promise of great discoveries. It wasn't in vain, I whispered to the photo, a silent promise to those we lost. We will continue the fight, for humanity, for you. I put the photo away and turned my attention to the reports on my desk. Somewhere out there, perhaps on another unexplored piece of ice or in the depths of an unknown ocean, other visitors were waiting. And when they awoke, we would be ready. Night fell over the world, bringing with it the stars, no longer just points of light in the sky, but a constant reminder of what awaited us beyond. A vast and mysterious universe, full of wonders and dangers beyond our comprehension. But as long as I stood guard, as long as the memory of those we lost lived on, humanity had a chance to survive, to evolve, to one day reach the stars on our own terms. And so, with renewed determination, I went back to work. Because the battle that began on that isolated station in Antarctica was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun.